Welcome to the Lady Entrepreneur podcast. I am your hostess, Jaha Knight, author of the Sophisticated Lady Guide to Being a Boss in Your Own Life. As usual, you can find me on jahaknight.com. Today, I am joined by Lady Entrepreneur Areva Martin. Areva is a Harvard-trained multi-award-winning attorney, author, and media personality. She provides expert commentary on national television and radio on a range of legal and social issues, including civil and criminal trials, labor and employment, family law, disability and autism rights, custody disputes, general civil matters, women in the workplace, and balancing careers and family. In addition, Areva is a nationally recognized children's and women's rights advocate and autism spokeswoman. She is the founder and president of Special Needs Network, Inc., a Los Angeles-based nonprofit organization which serves tens of thousands of families and raises millions of dollars for autism and related causes. Welcome to the Lady Entrepreneur podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be joining you today.
Great. Now, tell us a little bit about your business and what got you started.
Well, let's talk about my for-profit business. So I own one of the largest African-American female-owned law firms in Los Angeles, and I started my firm about 20 years ago. And I started the firm because I wanted to have more say over the types of clients I represented, and I wanted to have some input as a business owner. So that's the firm that, where I make my living, the job. You mentioned Special Needs Network. Special Needs Network is what I call my labor of love. It's a nonprofit I started about 8 years ago. I am a non-paid volunteer president, so I don't draw any income from Special Needs Network. My income earning job is actually my law firm.
Okay, and tell them the name of your law firm.
It's called Martin & Martin, LLP.
See, there you go. Now, what made you what made you want to go into law? Because I've thought about law, but I just couldn't get past the LSAT. It was too hard.
I always wanted to be a lawyer. Even as a little girl, I was fascinated by, television shows that portrayed lawyers. And I looked at the different professions as I was, getting to my second and third year in college. And I knew I couldn't be a doctor because I'm afraid of blood and I'm horrible at math. So the math and science classes for med school were totally out. But I was fascinated by the law. I was fascinated by the opportunity to make arguments, to interpret the law, and to really help people. And I saw the law as a vehicle that I could use to, make change, make social change. I was always one of those kids, even in fifth grade, I remember, I was always standing up for what would be considered the underdog. So law school for me was my way to earn a living and do that which I was just passionate about even from a little kid.
Now, you said you have one of the largest African-American female-owned law firms in LA. What challenges did you have to overcome to be in business?
One of the things when I started my law practice, I thought the hardest thing I would encounter would be getting clients. I thought it was going to be really hard to convince clients, to hire my law firm. I was a relatively young lawyer. I had, somewhat limited experience. LA is a huge market, probably the biggest legal market, second to maybe New York and San Francisco. So, it was highly, highly competitive. But what I found to be the biggest obstacle was not business development or getting clients. It was the people. Managing people. That has been one of the largest, biggest, challenges, and I think most business owners can attest to this, is HR is just, it can be really a nightmare, to be frank. It can be a nightmare dealing with, personnel issues and human relationship issues.
So what did you do to overcome that challenge?
Some of it was just the learning curve. It was just, getting mature. And I'll give you some concrete examples. So I think women in the workplace face some different challenges when it comes to managing people that men don't face. We are by nature and definition nurturers. So I spent a lot of time in the early years of my practice doing just that, what I'll call mothering and nurturing people. I'd have employees in my office till 9, 10, sometimes midnight, talking to them about their personal issues, their boyfriends, their girlfriends, their children, you know, and I know that male managers, no way was somebody going to come in, a woman, and sit down, in a male manager's office and start talking about all the problems with her boyfriend and be there 4 hours later still talking about those same problems. So I had to
Yeah.
learn how to set boundaries. I had to learn that, I was not there to be liked. It was far more important to be respected. And I think that's one of the lessons that women in the workplace have to learn. There is a difference. In high school, we want to be liked. You want to be the most popular. In business, it is not about being liked. It's about being respected. And when people respect you, they will work hard. They will be accountable. If they like you, they may or may not work. But it's a very different dynamic in the workplace for women.
So how did you create that boundary so that you shifted from trying to be well liked to well respected?
Like I said, first it started with boundaries. In my early practice years, early management years, I was showing up at all the baby showers, all the bridal showers, all the weddings, all the birthday parties, bearing gifts. And sometimes that's not a good thing to do in the workplace. When you're a young manager, you need to set those boundaries that, you have a professional relationship, but socializing with your employees, particularly when they're your same age or even younger, and a lot of them were older, it can be complicated because they see you in that social setting on the weekend, and then when they come back to work, it's hard for them to make the adjustment that you're the boss. So, if you've been hanging out with somebody, at the bar or the club on Friday night, then you come to work on Monday and like, where's that report? They're like, what? What are you talking about? So one of the things I did was I started making, very clear lines between what I would do at work and what I would do in my social life.
Now, I know you explained why you went into law, but what made you start a business instead of, did you clerk with someone? What was the process like?
I clerked with large firms, and I also, my first job out of law school, I worked with a corporate firm. So I had an opportunity to get some great training from other lawyers and to learn the practice of law. But I wanted freedom, as best I can put it. I wanted an opportunity to shape and mold and define for myself the kind of law practice I would have, the kind of clients I would represent. And I couldn't do that in a large corporate firm. You come in, you put your head down, you do the work that's given to you. But in your own firm, you get to be, the navigator. You get to define the kind of practice, whether you want to do criminal law, or civil law, or family law, or real estate. Those are decisions you get to make. So I just wanted that professional freedom.
And what was the biggest risk that you took when you made that decision to then leap out on your own?
The biggest risk I took was getting off the traditional track. So you mentioned early in your your introduction that I'm a Harvard Law School graduate, and that's correct. And when you are fortunate, and I was really fortunate to go to a law school like Harvard, there's really a professional track, and that track says you're going to go to a corporate Wall Street firm and make partner, or you're going to go maybe to the U.S. Attorney's Office, or maybe a large public interest firm, end up a judge or in some kind of judicial capacity. So when I left my large corporate law firm, the risk was that I was getting off of that traditional path. And so the question is, if that didn't work, if my own practice didn't work, how would future prospective future employers view that? Would they view me as someone that's off track now and that would be quote unquote damaged goods? Or would I be able to get back into, the corporate law firm practice? So I was taking a risk that, I was changing the trajectory of my career in a way that maybe, would be irreversible.
Was it difficult for you to change your mindset from that traditional to now more of a more entrepreneurial, pursue your goal type mindset, which I know going to law school and being that accomplished is pursuing that goal that way, but going into more of a not so traditional format, was that a little more difficult for you? Like, how did you change your mind?
You know, Jaha, it was very difficult, and a lot of it was because of the people that I was around. So most of my
Mm.
friends were Harvard Law School graduates or other, law school graduates, and they were on that traditional path. So, when you go to your group and you say you're going to do something that's not so traditional, unfortunately, you don't get a lot of support. And so
Mhm.
people were telling me, "Oh my God, you're giving up that great job. Oh my God, you're leaving this prestigious law firm." So I didn't have a lot of support, and so I had to, internally get comfortable with the decision that I was making and almost kind of go it alone. Now the good thing was my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, he was entrepreneurial and he was graduating from law school and he never even took a job. He graduated from law school and started into his own business right away. So I did have that cheerleader and that one supporter, but I would say outside of him, most of my peer group, including my family, I would say they were either weren't supportive or they were nervous. My family, they were afraid. Like, hey, you've
Mhm.
worked really hard. You got this great job. Are you sure you want to give it up? Because that represents security. And people get a little nervous when you give up something that seems pretty secure.
If there was one thing that you wish you had known before you started that business, before you started this business, what would that one thing have been?
People are the most important part of any business. Like I said, I thought it was business. I thought it was the product. I thought it was, the marketing. I had no idea that getting people to work for you, and again, I was a young African American lawyer. So a lot of the people I interviewed and hired, they were 10 years, 15 years older than me. So getting
Mhm.
them to respect me and to be willing to work for me was really challenging. And then just all the issues that people bring into the workplace. People come to work, and some people, bring all of their baggage to the workplace. And I wasn't prepared for that. I was not prepared to be tough. I was, by nature, I'm kind of I'm the person that's going to pick up the stray dog, the cat. I'm a save the world kind of person. So I was in the workplace, trying to save everyone. Again, not recognizing that I can't save anyone if a company is sinking because people aren't doing their jobs. So it was that learning the lesson of, being a tough but fair employer.
Were there any rough times that you had outside of people management?
Yeah, there were rough times. The economy, changes in the economy, changes in practice areas, changes with clients. Being an entrepreneur is, almost like being on a roller coaster. You're going to have some high highs and you're going to have some low lows. And the people that make it are the people that can persevere, who I think have a really strong foundation. I mean, you've got to be able to make sacrifices because sometimes when you work for yourself, you may be the last person that gets paid, and sometimes you may not get paid at all because you have to
Mhm.
put the welfare of the company first, and that may mean paying your employees even when there's not enough money to pay yourself. And a lot of people just aren't willing to make those kinds of sacrifices.
Well, when you did have to make those sacrifices, what advice or what kind of quote were you using to help yourself keep going?
I love one thing that Martin Luther King is he's famous for a lot of things. He's an icon in our community and really throughout the world. But he says sometimes, you have to keep going up the staircase even when you can't see the whole staircase. So I think it's, you have to keep taking steps even if you can't see the whole staircase. And essentially it means you may not be able to see the whole picture. You don't know where something's going to end up, but you've got to walk out on faith and you've got to take, baby steps to get where you're trying to go. So sometimes I didn't know, how I was going to make my payroll or where I was going to get the next client from, but I just had to keep methodically, doing the work, making good decisions because good decisions on top of other good decisions, that's what success is really all about. So even when you can't see the end, you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, sometimes you just have to keep plowing through.
So you said earlier that your husband was very supportive. Your peer group or the friends that you had at the time and your family were a little, more reticent to jump onto the wagon of you going out and doing your own thing, who are the 5 people now that support your efforts in your business?
Well, I can tell you once you are in business and if you can sustain yourself in business, all of those naysayers, quickly become supporters. So I can proudly report that my family is extremely supportive, and I changed my friends. I got friends who, I didn't get rid of all of my old friends, but I also started to surround myself with people who were of like mind, people who were entrepreneurs, people who were a little more, risk takers, and so they provided a lot of support for me. When I think of my team now, and this is my mantra about success, it is not about any one person. It really is about the team that you can assemble, because they're going to make or break you. So for me, of course, it's my husband, who's been an entrepreneur and just incredibly supportive. I think of my kids. I have 3 of them. I think of them as one unit, but they're also a big part of my success because they inspire me to do what I do. I have a best friend from college. And a best friend. I have 2 women friends. One is an entrepreneur I've been knowing since, 3rd grade, and one I met in college. These 2 women, very supportive, always lending an ear, always lending encouragement. And then I have an amazing executive assistant that you've had a chance to speak with as we're setting up this podcast. But having someone that you trust that works for you is really, really important. So when I think of my immediate team, that's, my immediate team. Then, of course, I have great staff at my law firm. I have great staff at my nonprofit. And I have a great lawyer, too. I think every good lawyer should have a great lawyer. And I have one of my Harvard classmates is my lawyer, and I turn to her frequently for advice from drafting contracts for the work I do on television to just giving me solid advice about my nonprofit and other projects that I'm involved in.
See, we didn't even talk about that. How did you transition into being a media expert?
It's an interesting story. For me, it started with a case. I had a case involving some kids who were autistic, and they were abused by their teacher. And I represented about 5 families who had these kids in this classroom with this one teacher. And the case got a lot of attention in this particular town because it was the first time that the district attorney in this town had charged a teacher with child abuse for abusing kids with disabilities. So the case got a lot of attention locally, and then it started to get some traction nationally. So I was invited onto the Dr. Phil show to bring my clients to talk about this case and this teacher being prosecuted. And the show went very well. It was my first really national television appearance. I probably had some smaller local appearances, but it was my first national appearance. And that day, they were taping 2 shows. And after I taped my show with my clients, there was a second show that they were taping, and it was about Dog the Bounty Hunter and his use of the N-word. And there was a debate about whether his show at that time, which had been suspended or taken off the air, should it be returned? So, should, people that use the N-word, be allowed to, have a platform on television? And they had all these men who were going to come on and debate the topic, but they didn't have a woman. So the producer from my show, she grabbed me and she says, "Hey, Areva, we didn't talk about this, but we have the second show, and we loved you on the first show, and will you stay and lend a female voice to this issue?" At the time, I had not been following the issue, so I didn't even know what the issue was. I said, "Sure, though, send me some emails with some of the news articles." And I had about 45 minutes in between shows to read these articles, get up to speed, and then go onto the second show. And it happened to be a show that had the amazing Bishop T.D. Jakes on it. He was one of the panelists.
Oh.
Very intimidated, to be on this show with Bishop T.D. Jakes and some other activists talking about this issue. But the show went really well, and from there I formed this incredible relationship with the Dr. Phil production team, and I started going on the show more regularly. And from that, those 2 appearances, I just started doing, other television shows and news shows. So that was really how my career in television got launched, though.
Wow, that was serendipitous. Very nice.
Absolutely. Very.
So what then made you go on to write the book? Now, I understand what made you become an advocate for autism. What made you write your book?
You know, I wrote my book because I was frustrated. I was really upset because as I went out into the world to try to find resources for my son Marty, educational and medical and, community resources to help him with his autism, I was finding, just tons and tons of information, but none of it really clear, concise, easily accessible, and easily, to put into action. So I said, you know what? I'm a lawyer. I've been helping families. I've had to help my own son. Let me take all of this information I've learned, put it in one book, one place, so that the next parent that gets a diagnosis of a child with autism, they won't have to, read 5 million entries on the internet. They can find, answers to their basic questions and even some complex questions in this book. So that was really my motivation. And I was really fortunate to have a national publisher like Penguin. I went on a book tour. I got to meet just hundreds of parents all over the country and hear their story, share my story. So it was really an empowering experience.
Oh, wow. You have had a very varied career. And then you started your nonprofit organization.
Yes, again, when I get frustrated, I tend to go into action. Again, frustrated because when I looked across the landscape of organizations, dedicated or devoted to autism, I didn't see people of color. And I'm thinking, here I am, a mom, and I know there had to be other African American, Latino, Asian moms that, were struggling in a way that I was. And I wanted those voices to be a part of a larger conversation about autism and disabilities. So I started Special Needs Network. Again, my husband at that time was not working in my law firm, but came into my law firm so that he could manage kind of the day-to-day operations of the firm so that I could take some time to write the book and then get the nonprofit off the ground. So it's really fortunate to have that partnership there so that I could really, pursue the nonprofit. And so today we continue to work together in the law firm, and I also, split my time with the nonprofit.
How do you balance? Because we hear so much about women not being able to have it all, and you have a family, you have a nonprofit, you have a successful business, and you're married. So how do you manage all of that?
And I get asked that a lot. And, someone asked me the other day, what did I think of, the title Superwoman for women. I says, well, I definitely don't identify with that title. I do not think of myself as a superwoman. I think of myself as being fortunate, like I said, to have great people around me and people that love, support, and, help me do all the things that I'm passionate about. And I think for women, you can have, I don't know about it all, because all is defined differently for, everyone.
Different people.
But I think you can have a husband, if you choose, or partner, whatever is your, persuasion. You can have children, you can have a career, and you can do something that you're passionate about if you don't have the good fortune of your job also being your passion. And it's about priorities. It's about smart decision making, and it's about, again, the people you surround yourself with. And I go back to this for women again. And again, I see this come up. I saw it in the corporate law firm I worked in. I see it in my own law firm. And I see it in my law practice when I consult, with women. Sometimes we fall into this really bad habit of surrounding ourselves with our girlfriends, people that may share interest around shopping or movies or social things, but they're not the people who can really help us with our career goals or our family goals. So that's like I said, when I started my law firm, it didn't help my cause to spend all my time with people who were in traditional law firms because they couldn't help me. They couldn't inspire me. If anything, they were pulling me down because they were negative about the choice that I was making. So I needed to get myself in situations with people who could uplift and support me, and I could do the same for them. So I always say to women, if you want to, go to medical school or you want to start a business selling shoes or whatever it is you want to do, find people that can help you, achieve those goals. They're not your girlfriends who you can go hang out with and shop. If you're lucky, they're going to be one and the same person, but they may not be. So if you're trying to start a business, you need to talk to people who have business experience, maybe who can write business plans, maybe accountants, maybe business lawyers, professional people, who have some expertise that they can help you in, pursuing your goals. And I just find that sometimes as women, that gets a little challenging for us.
Now, being that you said that covers the advice that you would give. But if you could recommend two things that the audience can have in their arsenal or toolkit while starting their business, what would those two things be?
First thing is, be prepared to sacrifice. All too often, I meet entrepreneurs. They think they're going to start a business today, and tomorrow they're going to be driving in a Bentley. Not going to happen. You look at, these moguls, maybe rap moguls or entertainment or sports figures, throw them out of the equation. They are not your role models. Business people, entrepreneurs, people starting small businesses have to be prepared to sacrifice. And if you can't go into the business bleeding the business, again, if you have, high consumption expectations. So in the first years of my law firm, I had a 10-year-old car. I lived in a small one-bedroom apartment, and I rarely shopped because I needed to take every dime that I made in that business and reinvest it in the business. So my first advice to you piece of advice is be prepared to sacrifice and to invest in your business. The second piece of advice is sometimes people think when they go into their own business that they're not going to have to work very hard. They say, oh, I'm sick of working on this job. They expect me to be here 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day. I'm going to start my own business, and I'm going to get up at 10 o'clock, and I'm going to be on the golf course at 4. I'm going to be at the nail salon if I... Not. Bad thinking. The first years of my law firm, I got to work around 9. If I got home at midnight, it was an early night. Every weekend, I was at work. Now, today, fast forward 20 years, from that date, we work differently. We do everything on our smartphones. We're on our iPads, we're laptops. We can work from home. But I don't work any less today than I would have worked 20 years ago. I work differently. So any myth that you have that working for yourself requires less than what you put in on a job is just that. It's a myth. And if you go into business in that mindset, you're probably going to fail. So 2 pieces of advice: be prepared to sacrifice, and number 2, be prepared to work your butt off.
Now, imagine you're doing a 15-minute mentorship with a law student, and they either want to go into law or they want to start their own law practice. What would be the 5 big things that you would tell them that would help them in your industry?
One is develop a practice area. So you've got to go deep in some area. So whether it's criminal law or family law, you've got to have some depth in a particular practice area. 2 is you have to learn to promote yourself. You've got to be okay and comfortable with talking to other people about what you do. And again, sometimes women, we don't feel very comfortable. We think that's bragging, and we think there's something negative about that. So you have to get okay with being your own best marketer. Number 3 is you got to build some relationships because you're going to eat what you kill. So you have to learn to develop business. You can't be the kind of person that walks into a room that's full of potential business prospects, but you're in the corner. So you got to get comfortable with going up, talking to people, again, promoting your business. You have to start, I tell everyone, if you don't have a head for money, accounting, you got to find someone that does. Because if you start your business with sloppy bookkeeping, record keeping, that's probably what you're going to do throughout your business. And if you're making $1 or you're making $10 million, you want to be able to account for every dollar. You want to have accurate, good records. Very, very important. And then 5th, I tell people again, be prepared to sacrifice and work hard in the early years of a law practice. You're not going to become Johnny Cochran in year 1. You may not become Johnny Cochran in year 5. You may never become Johnny Cochran. Doesn't mean you can't be successful, but you've got to be realistic. You've got to have a plan that's realistic that gets you from point A to point B. I think being an entrepreneur is, it's one of the most rewarding things anyone can do. But you've got to decide, again, are you cut out for it? The discipline. Again, this whole concept, and I hear so many people say this, that when they start working for themselves, it's easier. It's not easier. The discipline that's required, it's an incredible amount of discipline to get up and, show up at work, when if you don't show up, there's not going to be the boss there, tapping you on the shoulder saying, well, you're 10 minutes late today. You have to be that voice for yourself that motivates yourself to get up and, like I said, to keep a schedule and to take care of business.
Wow, that is amazing. This has been an awesome interview. Thank you so much. Can you tell the audience what's next for you in your business, in your nonprofit, in your speaking, all that?
Well, I think for me, like I said, I've been really blessed to have great teams, and I just continue to try to build leaders, attract great talent. In our nonprofit, we're just increasing the number of families that we serve throughout the state of California. In our law practice, we're just trying to continue to do great work and grow our practice. We want to be a model for other African American businesses in the legal profession, as well as just the business community at large. And so I just look forward to continue. I love talking to and mentoring other women, other business owners, people who have decided that they want to become entrepreneurs. So I just look forward to continuing to make those really important connections.
Well, thank you. And everything will be in the show notes, all the ways to contact Areva. She has been amazing. So I truly appreciate you and all the effort you put forth to try to get onto this podcast. So thank you.
It was challenging, but so rewarding, and so glad I did it. And thank you for the great work you're doing and all that you're doing to promote and uplift women business owners. Bravo to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I truly do.